My husband inherited $62 million dollars after his father's death. He mocked me. Now I don't need you. I signed the divorce quietly. But when the lawyer read the fine print, his face turned ghostly white. It was never his money. I'm 32 now, born and raised in a middle-class family in Connecticut, where hard work was the golden rule. My parents were the kind who'd skip vacations so I could have a shot at college, and I carried that grit with me. I graduated with a business management degree and dove into marketing, where my knack for numbers and organization turned heads. Friends in college used to joke that I was their personal finance guru, always helping them stretch their ramen budgets. Deep down, I had this dream of starting my own consulting firm, but life, as it often does, had other plans. 7 years ago, I met David at a friend's birthday party. He was the guy who lit up the room, charismatic, handsome, with this infectious passion for architectural design. Architecture is about creating spaces that change how people feel, he told me that night, handing me a glass of wine with a grin that made my heart skip. We talked until the party fizzled out, and when he asked for my number, I knew I was already half gone for him. 6 months later, he proposed on a beachside getaway, the ring modest but perfect. I said yes, believing I'd found my forever. Our wedding was small, joyful, a day I thought marked the start of something unbreakable. But looking back, there were cracks I ignored. David hopped between jobs during our courtship, always blaming difficult bosses or companies that didn't get his vision. I believed in him, convinced his big break was coming. But after we married, the pattern stuck. He'd start a job with fire, then quit or get fired within months, always with a story that sounded just plausible enough. Meanwhile, I was the one keeping us afloat, taking on extra projects, working late nights, telling myself it was temporary. When my career takes off, I'll take care of you, he'd promise. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Then there was Harold, David's father, a successful businessman who intimidated me at first. David warned me he was tough to please, but when we met, we clicked instantly. Over dinner, he asked about my career, really listened, and later showed me his collection of business books many I'd read. You understand financial responsibility, he said, his voice warm but sharp. I've tried to teach David that for years. Harold became my mentor, my Sunday dinner confidant. We'd talk investments, business trends, while David found reasons to duck out early. He started resenting our bond, tossing out snide comments about me sucking up to his dad. I brushed it off, thinking he was just insecure. But the years wore on and our financial struggles deepened. David's job searches grew half-hearted, and when I suggested he consider roles outside architecture, he'd snap, "You don't believe in me." Our fights about money got uglier. "You make me feel like a failure," he'd say, and I'd carry that guilt, even as I worked 60-hour weeks to keep us going. I took a management role with more pay, but longer hours and more travel, which David used to accuse me of prioritizing work over him. Never mind that I was paying every bill. 3 years into our marriage, Harold got the diagnosis. Terminal cancer, less than a year to live. It shattered me. I stepped up, driving him to appointments, sitting through chemo sessions, while David seemed to check out. He'd show up late to hospital visits, phone in hand, always with an excuse. Harold and I grew even closer in those months. He'd share stories of his life, his business, and his worries about David's sense of entitlement. "I love my son," he told me once, his voice heavy, "but I worry about his judgment, especially with money." In his final weeks, he pulled me aside, frail but clear-eyed. "You've been the daughter I never had," he said, squeezing my hand. "Trust that I see everything clearly." I didn't know what he meant then, but I held his hand when he passed, promising to honor his memory. David showed up 20 minutes too late, blaming the hospital's bad vibes. Harold's funeral was beautiful, every detail planned to reflect his life. I poured my heart into it, delivering a eulogy that left people in tears. David barely helped, claiming grief made it too hard. Afterward, his mood darkened when Harold's friends kept consoling me, saying, "He thought of you as a daughter. I could see it eating at him." 2 days later, we sat in the attorney's office for the will reading. The room was heavy, all polished wood and legal jargon. Then came the bombshell. To my son, David Wilson, I leave the sum of $62 million. The air vanished from the room. David's face lit up like he'd won the lottery, gripping my hand so hard it hurt. I was stunned Harold was successful. But $62 million? dollars? I didn't even notice the attorney's careful wording about provisions and conditions. David sure didn't. He was already planning how to spend it. That night, he booked the fanciest restaurant in town, ordered champagne, invited friends grief forgotten. By morning, he'd bought a $200,000 sports car without a word to me. When I questioned it, he snapped, "It's my inheritance. I don't need permission." He moved money into accounts I couldn't access, changed passwords, and suddenly our home was filled with new friends pitching shady investments. Designer clothes piled up. He talked about buying a Malibu beach house, and I was rarely invited to his lavish dinners. When I tried to talk, hoping this was just grief and greed talking, he brushed me off. "You need to adjust your thinking," he'd say, like I was the one out of touch. Then came the night I cooked his favorite meal, candles lit, hoping to reconnect. He didn't show. He stumbled in at midnight, reeking of cologne and liquor, muttering about an investment dinner. I suggested grief counseling. He laughed it off. "I don't need a therapist. I need space." The distance grew. He stopped coming home some nights, dodging my calls, offering flimsy excuses about meetings. Our joint account was nearly empty, drained by unexplained withdrawals. A receipt for a $5,000 dinner, charges for jewelry I never saw, hotel rooms in our city, it all pointed to one thing. The truth hit like a freight train when I saw a text on his phone from Veronica. "Last night was amazing. Miss you already." I scrolled, heart pounding, finding photos, plans, proof of an affair that started right after Harold's death. My friend Kimberly confirmed it, hesitantly telling me she'd seen David with another woman, all over each other at the mall. When I confronted him, he didn't even flinch. "So what if I'm seeing someone?" he said coldly. "I deserve to be happy. Veronica gets me in ways you never could." He tore into me, saying I was controlling, jealous of his success, that he'd settled for me because I was safe. The worst, "You stayed because you thought Harold would leave us money." I was speechless. Years of supporting him twisted into something ugly. He packed my suitcase, told me to leave our home, his name was on the deed, and said, "You're useless to me now." I stood in the doorway looking at this stranger who'd replaced my husband and realized money hadn't changed him. It had just shown me who he'd always been. That first night, I sat in my car, numb, until I called my friend Jessica. She took me in, no questions asked, just a hug that held me together. The days that followed were a blur, shaking hands, nausea, nightmares of falling. I called in sick, wore the same sweatpants for days, barely ate. Jessica sat with me, patient, as I whispered. He threw me away like I was nothing. Finding an apartment was a small step back to reality, but collecting my things from our home was torture. My heirlooms were gone, photos in the trash, my garden tools snapped. David was erasing me. The divorce papers came, offering me a measly $20,000 and an NDA to keep quiet. My lawyer, Melissa, was outraged but warned me David's wealth could bury us in legal fees. With no choice, I accepted a slightly better deal, $35,000 and 6 months of health insurance. Signing those papers felt like signing away my dignity. David showed up to the final meeting late, tanned and smug, Veronica waiting in his new car. "I hope you're doing well, Samantha," he said, fake as ever. I walked out, broken but free. 3 days later, a call changed everything. Walter Green, Harold's personal attorney, asked to meet. Skeptical, I went to his elegant office where he asked, "Did David initiate the divorce?" I told him everything: David's cruelty, the rushed divorce, my attempts to save us. Walter slid an envelope across the desk, revealing a secondary will Harold had kept secret. The $62 million was David's, but only if he stayed married to me for 5 years after Harold's death. If he initiated a divorce before then, 80% of it, nearly $50 million, went to me. Harold's handwritten letter broke me open. "Samantha, if you're reading this, my son has made the choice I feared. You've been more of a child to me than David. This money cannot buy happiness, but in your hands, I trust it will be used wisely." I was shaking, tears blurring the page. Walter confirmed it was ironclad. David's lawyer had hidden the clause, and David had rushed the divorce to keep me in the dark. As I processed this, my phone lit up with desperate texts from David. We need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. That night, he showed up at Jessica's, a wreck, no longer the cocky millionaire, but a man unraveling. I made a mistake, he pleaded, claiming grief and pressure had clouded his judgment. I asked when he learned about the will's clause. His hesitation gave him away. He'd known and gambled I wouldn't. I've spent millions, he admitted, voice breaking. Veronica left when the money ran out. We can remarry, satisfy the trust. I looked at him, begging on the floor, and said, "You were right about one thing, David. I'm useless to you now." Walter filed to enforce the trust, and after months of David's countersuits and lies, the judge ruled in my favor. Suddenly, I was responsible for $50 million. I didn't splurge, I hired advisors, kept my modest apartment, and built a plan to preserve the wealth. David's parents tried to guilt me into sharing it, but I held firm, honoring Harold's wishes. I poured my energy into my dream, a consulting firm helping small businesses with financial strategy. 6 months in, I had clients, a downtown office, and a feature in a business magazine. I also started the Harold Wilson Foundation, using part of the inheritance to fund financial education for women recovering from hardship. Every scholarship, every mentee felt like a piece of Harold's legacy living on. A year after the divorce, I ran into David at a restaurant. He was a shadow of himself, bankrupt, alone, Veronica long gone. I realized what I threw away, he said, apologizing for the first time without an agenda. I listened, then he set a clear boundary. Our paths were separate now. As a final act of closure, I paid his bar tab, not out of pity, but to close the door on our past. Today, I'm not the woman who begged to save a marriage. I stand taller, smile easier, and run a thriving business. Therapy helped me rebuild trust in myself, and my new apartment is mine, every detail chosen for me. Dating's cautious but hopeful, I know my worth now. Harold's gift wasn't the money, it was the chance to find my strength, to turn betrayal into a beginning. So I'm curious, have any of you faced a betrayal that led to something better? Share your stories in the comments. If this resonated, hit like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you to what you truly deserve.